Number 10. Meth and an AR-15. In August of 2022 in Oklahoma, a woman high on methamphetamine was put into the back of a police car, but things didn't go according to plan for the officers that detained her. The woman managed to wiggle out of her handcuffs and grabbed the cop's assault rifle. She then started shooting out of the windshield. The woman was identified as Rachel Zion Clay, and she was detained on a Friday during a welfare check. The authorities were called because Rachel was exhibiting some extremely erratic behavior. When the officers responded, they were just trying to detain Rachel momentarily. She wasn't under arrest, but they needed to get her in the back of the cruiser so they could figure out exactly what was going on. She was put in double-lock handcuffs and tucked into the back of the car. But what happened next is every cop's worst nightmare. Luckily for everyone on the internet, it was all captured on video. Rachel slipped her right wrist out of the handcuffs, reached into the console in the front of the car, unlocked the gun compartment, and then grabbed the AR-15 assault rifle. While high on meth and with the assault rifle already loaded and ready to go, she flipped on the flashlight and pointed it at the police officers and the homeowner who'd called the cops. Then she started blindly firing the weapon with her head down. Rachel wasn't even looking where she was shooting. She just squeezed the trigger and pointed the gun out the window. In total, 9 rounds were fired off, and it was a miracle nobody was killed. The homeowner was grazed and 1 officer was nicked, but there were no serious injuries. Getting Rachel into the police cruiser had been difficult enough, but now the cops couldn't get her out. She barricaded herself inside for 4 hours before she eventually surrendered. Rachel likely would have been able to go home just fine if she hadn't tried to kill everybody. But now she's facing multiple charges, including 3 counts of shooting with intent to kill. And considering she shot a cop, it's unlikely she'll ever see the light of day again. According to the most recent update on the case, Rachel was being held on a bond of $1 million. Number 9. An innocent bystander. In Bossier City, Louisiana in 2019, local authorities arrested Carolyn Robinson. The incident between Carolyn and the officers was captured on video from the squad car dash camera. In the footage, you can hear the officers saying they ran her information and confirmed that she had an active warrant. This all went down in a convenience store parking lot on a hot day in July. But responding officers thought Carolyn was a completely different person, another woman from Shreveport who had an active warrant for robbery. The issue was that Carolyn was completely innocent. The police apparently messed up because they were switching over to a new software system. Police spokeswoman Tracy Landry said that when they switched to the new system, there was an issue with the software. This glitch in the system resulted in an innocent woman's arrest on what was already a pretty bad day for her. Carolyn's morning started with a fender bender. She was traveling toward I-20 to get on the highway when somebody rear-ended her. She called the cops to make the report, then sat in her car for 45 minutes while she waited for the authorities. When the police got there, things took a grim turn. Officers went from asking her about the accident to questioning her about a robbery. Their computer was saying she was a felon with a warrant from 2016, but that wasn't the case at all. Carolyn later told reporters that she was just trying to do the right thing, but then the cops showed up, misidentified her, and took her to jail. Luckily, she wasn't behind bars for very long. When they got back to the station, the issue was cleared. Carolyn was then allowed to leave, but not before she was terribly offended. As it turned out, she'd been mixed up with a man. It wasn't another woman who carried out the robbery she was accused of, but a man from a totally different place. Number 8. Driving drunk. A police officer from Walton Hills, Ohio, is currently facing a federal lawsuit. The lawsuit alleges that the cop used excessive force for the way he treated a woman at a traffic stop in February of 2022. Amanda Mills suffered injuries when Officer C.J. Schmidt ripped her out of her own vehicle. She received permanent wounds to her chest and a broken wrist bone due to what she described as violent, unnecessary, and needless abuse. Amanda was stopped for speeding by Officer Schmidt on February 19th. So she pulled over to the side of the road without hesitation. There was nothing illegal in her car and she wasn't drunk or high at the time. She also had no outstanding warrants and had no criminal history. There was no reason for anyone to think she was dangerous. But when Officer Schmidt approached her vehicle, he was screaming for no reason for her to get out of the car. She was scared, so she pulled out her phone to record the encounter. Officer Schmidt and his colleague then pulled Amanda from her vehicle and smashed her against the car. The cops continue to hurt her, even though she begged for them to stop. She wasn't resisting, but she got handcuffed and was thrown in the back of the car anyway. She was released from custody after about 8 minutes, but the whole ordeal was extremely unnecessary. But this is only half the story. 2 months later, Officer Schmidt made another traffic stop when he pulled over 26-year-old Nicholas Monachino for driving drunk. Nicholas was visibly intoxicated, driving over the limit, and had a 6-pack of beer in his vehicle. The man tested twice the legal limit for alcohol, but Officer Schmidt let him go without any problems. 12 minutes later, Nicholas crashed into a vehicle and killed a young couple. He's now being charged with aggravated vehicular homicide. But if it was the same officer in both stories, why did these 2 traffic stops turn out so differently? That's something that will likely be brought up in the lawsuit. What we know based on video evidence is that Officer Schmidt knew Nicholas personally. During their brief exchange, they talked about their families and the upcoming holidays. But if Nicholas had been arrested for drunk driving, 2 innocent bystanders would still be alive today. Number 7. The Stalker Cop. A police officer from Seabright, New Jersey, has gotten into some big trouble for stalking his ex-girlfriend. Monmouth County prosecutor Raymond S. Santiago says the officer allegedly stalked, made threats, and cyber-harassed his ex. 46-year-old Eric A. Bennett is currently facing a whole slew of charges, including criminal mischief, cyber-harassment, stalking, official misconduct, and hindering apprehension. An investigation revealed the officer was in a brief relationship with an unnamed adult woman in 2022. It ended in November, but the next month the officer showed up unannounced to the woman's house and allegedly threatened to beat her up. She then blocked him electronically and installed security cameras so that there would be proof if he showed up again. But even after all that, she was still getting harassed by Bennett. The victim began to receive bizarre messages from a random online account, which investigators later connected to Bennett. The weekend after he showed up at her residence invited, all her tires were slashed. Then that weekend, she was tormented. The flagpole was ripped off the front of her house, her car was keyed, and someone stole her security cameras. This was all scary enough, but it gets even worse. During the investigation, it was revealed that Officer Bennett used the law enforcement database on over 30 occasions to stalk this woman. He accessed personal information about her and used the database to look up people she was familiar with. Thankfully for the victim, though, the Seabright Police Department took the allegations very seriously. The officer has already been suspended without pay and is currently dealing with the matter in court. Number 6. Planting drugs. A former Florida cop was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison for planting drugs on innocent drivers during at least 3 different traffic stops. Zachary Wester was convicted in May of 2021 on 19 charges. The drug planting happened when he worked for the Jackson County Sheriff's Office between 2016 and 2018. He wound up getting fired in the middle of the investigation, and 119 cases he was involved in were dropped. That means even if the majority of those cases were legitimate, they're now being thrown out because Zachary can't be trusted. The officer was busted on his own body cam dropping a baggie of drugs into the truck of Teresa Odom, but this was hardly his first time doing this. In total, 33 people came forward to say that Zachary Wester ruined their lives. They even banded together to file a lawsuit against him for violating their civil rights. We don't know how much the 33 plaintiffs are going to receive, but the case was resolved in only 10 hours at the federal courthouse in Pensacola after Zachary was already sent to prison. The plaintiffs involved in the lawsuit reaffirmed what we already knew. They were stopped for minor driving infractions, something as silly as going a few miles over the speed limit. Then they were taken to jail after Zachary Wester discovered drugs in their vehicle that he planted there himself. The Tallahassee attorney who represented 27 of the plaintiffs, Marie Maddox, said her clients never fully recovered. This wasn't just an unfortunate run-in with the law for these people. Many of Zachary's victims lost their jobs, and in some cases, the victims lost their spouses and had their children taken away from them. Prosecutors originally wanted 15 years, but Zachary was sentenced to 12.5 years instead. Number 5. Hit by a train. In early 2023, a woman filed a lawsuit against the police departments and officers that contributed to her getting hit by a train. Yes, you heard that right, she was literally hit by a train. The victim's name is Ureni Rios Gonzalez, and she was just 20 years old at the time. She was pulled over by the cops in September while driving through Weld County, Colorado. As coincidence would have it, she was pulled over right before a set of train tracks. Ureni drove over the tracks and then pulled over, but Platteville Police Sergeant Pablo Vasquez stopped his vehicle right on the train tracks. What followed was captured on the video's body cams and on the dash cams of their squad cars. Attorney Jonathan Stein, who's working for the victim, told CBS News Colorado that this case is one of the most egregious examples of law enforcement abuse he's ever seen. He then went on to label the officer's behavior as inexcusable neglect. Ureni was handcuffed and placed in the back of the police cruiser that was parked on the train tracks. But then a train came. The locomotive smashed into the patrol car, which caused it to fly through the air before landing a half mile, 0.8 kilometers away. By some miracle, Ureni wasn't killed, but she was injured and hospitalized for weeks. She received a broken arm, broken ribs, and several other injuries as a result of the accident. The lawsuit documents provided photographs showing the plainly visible railroad crossing sign. There was also an image of a blue emergency notification sign with a phone number listed for the Union Pacific Railroad. This is supposed to be used by police to notify incoming trains of activity on or around the tracks. But the officers ignored the sign, parked on a railroad track, and then stood by as Ureni was sandwiched by an oncoming train. It was a good thing the train conductor saw what was coming, though. The driver blew the horn at 7:53 p.m. and then hit the brakes. Just 20 seconds later, the train hit the patrol car at 47 miles per hour, 76 kilometers per hour. That may not seem very fast, but the train weighed 11,153 tons, 10,117,831.4 kilograms. The police cruiser only weighed around 2.5 tons, 2,268 kilograms. Ureni's lawyer says damages have already exceeded $400,000 and that the total damages will likely be around $5 million. Number 4. Who killed Maria James? In 2017, Melbourne police admitted to using an incorrect DNA sample to rule out a priest with a history of abusing children in the brutal slaying of Maria James. Maria James was stabbed 68 times in her home in 1980. We still don't know who was responsible, but someone murdered Maria with extreme prejudice at her home bookstore in Thornbury, Australia. At the time, police described it as a bizarre and frenzied killing. A handful of key suspects have been named over the years, but nobody was ever pinned with the murder. But only recently have we learned that it wasn't just a case of a crafty killer, it may have been a case of incompetent police work. An inquest has been told that 14 years of potential progress was wiped out by a single bungle involving DNA. Additionally, the police made serious errors in the storage and examination of evidence, which may have hindered Maria's killer being brought to justice. The police have been accused of 5 major errors during their investigation. The biggest was the mistake they made with the blood-stained pillow that was allegedly taken from Maria's home. The police thought the bloody pillow was from Maria's house, but it wasn't. It was from a completely unrelated case. Nonetheless, the police used DNA from the pillow to rule out potential suspects, including Father Bongiorno. The priest died in 2002, and in 2013 it was revealed that he'd abused Maria's son Adam when he was only 11 years old. Adam happens to have cerebral palsy and Tourette syndrome and was a victim of the priest in the weeks before Maria was killed. The leading theory right now is that Maria found out about the abuse and was threatening to go to the police, and in order to cover his tracks, the priest then murdered Maria to keep her silent. The cops may have pinned the crime on him if it wasn't for the wrong bloody pillow ruling him out as a suspect. Although the family has petitioned to have the investigation reopened, there still isn't any definitive evidence for who killed Maria James in 1980. Number 3. The creepy captain. A creepy police captain in New York City is the recent target of a lawsuit. The lawsuit was filed by a female NYPD detective who says she endured relentless advances for 18 months. For almost 2 years, her boss, creepy Captain Brian Flynn, allegedly sent her unsolicited pictures of his private parts. He also made some extremely disgusting offers, such as offering to exchange favors for a pair of her underpants. But this is just one example out of many. Detective Michelle Almanzar says Brian Flynn sent her over 45 explicit photographs and messages, then retaliated when she refused his advances. We can't even get into great detail because some of the photographs he sent the detective are beyond disturbing, even too disturbing for the internet. Some of the pictures were taken in his own office, while other cops worked just outside his door. Brian didn't take rejection well. When Michelle refused his advances, he got angry. She told him to stop, but in response, the captain made her stay late and rewrite her reports. He denied her time off and went out of his way to bully her. This is all according to Michelle and her lawsuit. Michelle says it got to the point where she'd allow him to send pictures because when she asked him not to, he took out his frustration on her and her team. The campaign of terror started right after Detective Michelle Almanzar was transferred to his precinct in the Bronx in 2021. Michelle has been on the force for 9 years, yet she developed more severe anxiety from her boss than from being a cop in New York City. The final straw was in November 2022 when he denied her a day off. She couldn't take it and officially reported him, which resulted in him getting transferred. But Brian Flynn showed up the next day at 4 a.m. to harass Michelle anyway. Brian has since been placed on modified duty, allegedly for unrelated reasons. According to Michelle's lawsuit, the department has done nothing to assure that he won't harass other female employees. He doesn't even appear to have been punished for his alleged abuse of power. Number 2. Doxxing on TikTok. A Dallas cop took privacy breaches to a whole new level on March 2, 2021. The cop is currently being sued for streaming a traffic stop on TikTok, resulting in the driver being doxxed to all those watching online. Doxxing is when you reveal someone's identity to the public, which is something you aren't supposed to do on most social media platforms. But Officer Francisco Castillo did exactly that when he live-streamed himself performing a traffic stop. Officer Castillo pulled over the unsuspecting driver for no apparent reason other than to entertain a few dozen people on the web. He pulled over Tori Osby, showing his driver's license to everyone online without his knowledge or consent. One of the people who happened to be watching was able to use the information on Tori's driver's license to get into contact with him, informing him what happened. Tori had no idea his license number, home address, and place of birth were all free information on TikTok after the incident. The Good Samaritan informed Tori of what happened, and this led to the current privacy violation lawsuit. It's been filed against Officer Castillo and the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. According to a report by NBC5, there were only 109 people watching the live stream. It also wasn't the first time the deputy live-streamed himself on the app while on duty. But since all this has come to light, the stream has been removed from TikTok. However, we don't know if they were taken down by the app or by the officer himself. The civil rights attorney representing the victim, James Roberts, had some pretty harsh words for the officer. He claims Officer Castillo didn't pull Tori over for any kind of traffic violation. The attorney says the traffic stop was just because Officer Castillo wanted to get followers, views, and likes. Number 1. Meth or donut crumbs. A man in Florida was awarded $37,500 for a silly mistake involving meth and donuts. One day in December of 2015, 64-year-old Daniel Rushing had just dropped off his friend for chemotherapy. He was also driving home an older woman from his church who worked nearby at the 7-Eleven to save her the 2-mile, 3.2-kilometer walk. After Daniel dropped off the woman at her job, the cops pulled him over. The officer responsible for the traffic stop said Daniel was driving 42 miles an hour, 68 kilometers an hour, in a 30 zone. She also claimed Daniel failed to make a complete stop before he entered the road. Daniel complied with the cop's request and handed over his license. Upon inspection, Officer Shelby Riggs Hopkins immediately noticed the man's concealed carry permit. When asked, Daniel confirmed that he did indeed have a pistol. Then, for her own safety, the officer asked if Daniel could step out of his vehicle. But afterward, things quickly got out of hand. By this time, there were 4 cops at the scene. Officer Riggs Hopkins then asked if she and some of the other officers could search Daniel's car. All 4 of them conducted a thorough inspection of this elderly man's vehicle, after which they claimed they'd found crystals on the floor mat that tested positive in the field kit for methamphetamine. Daniel said it was impossible, however, and told officers he'd never even smoked a cigarette in his life, never mind crystal meth. He tried to explain that the crystals on his floor were only crumbs from a donut, but the cops didn't buy it, and Daniel was arrested on charges of possessing meth while armed with a weapon. Daniel was then taken to jail. When he called his wife to tell her what happened, the guy sitting next to him started to laugh. The same man then looked at Daniel and said, "This is crazy. I think you got a real good lawsuit here." Sure enough, he was right. When Daniel's vehicle was sent to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for additional testing, they confirmed that the white crystal substance on the floor wasn't meth. The field kit resulted in a false negative. Daniel didn't have meth, he just liked donuts. He did end up filing a lawsuit though, and rightfully so, as he was awarded $37,500 for his trouble. Would you rather get stuck dealing with a mean cop or an incompetent cop? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys!